Refinement of Antichrist. Trilogy by Natalia Foley.
Chapter 25. Bonpo Lama Mohan was preparing for the most important day of his life, his 43rd life. Bonpo Lama had been blessed with the gift of reincarnation. It had happened exactly 43 lifetimes ago. He closed his eyes, trying to recall those very distant events. He had been a very young man, full of life, energy and ambition. He was the smartest and bravest among his small tribe, which lived in complete isolation atop a high mountain, deep in the wilderness. Nonetheless, the tribe had its myths and legends. The most important legend concerned their life's purpose. The shaman had said that the tribe had a great destiny. They were honored with a very special mission, to guard the gates. That was it. That was all he knew, all the tribe knew about their mission. They had to guard the gate. They had learned this as soon as they began to speak. For most members of the tribe, their very first word was the gate. He had no idea what kind of gate they were supposed to guard, and honestly, he didn't care much. His days were consumed by small daily events. Every morning, like everyone else in the tribe, he practiced meditation for hours. No one ever explained why it was so important. They simply sat for hours on end, spines straight, knees bent, striving to reach an incredible level of meditation, where breathing ceased, sensation disappeared, the mind remained sharp and alert, and the body became almost weightless, so much so that one could almost levitate. Well, almost. He remembered practicing this amazing skill, trying to eliminate all parasitic thoughts from his mind, focusing only on the warm stream of energy flowing around him. Suddenly, the stream lifted him up. He became weightless, floating in the air, feeling no gravity at all, only incredible lightness and happiness. He didn't know how long it lasted. He was so consumed by these new sensations that he didn't realize when it ended or how he returned to the ground. The only thing he remembered afterward was the gaze of his teacher, Bonpo Lama Mohan. Lama was looking straight at him, his eyes penetrating to the deepest corners of Mohan's soul. And then something else happened. "How did you do it?" Sonam Khan asked, but his lips didn't move. At first, Mohan couldn't understand. How could he hear the Lama's voice if the Lama wasn't speaking? Then it dawned on him, Lama was telepathic. He was transmitting his words directly into Mohan's mind. How could he do that? Mohan wondered. Then he realized, if Lama could speak into his mind, perhaps he could also read it. In that case, Mohan didn't want to appear as a scared and confused youth, so he immediately eliminated all thoughts of confusion and responded, without moving his lips either, "I don't know, teacher. I was enjoying the stream of energy, and I was lifted." It was a great freeing experience. Sonam Khan remained silent. His lips weren't moving, and he wasn't transmitting anything into Mohan's mind either. Yet Mohan felt his presence inside his own mind. He realized this was some kind of test, so he relaxed his muscles, calmed his mind as his teacher had taught him, and froze in expectation of further guidance. It took some time before Sonam spoke again. "Be in the monastery tonight. You know when. You know where." Then he turned and left. Mohan was not surprised. He knew the Lama hadn't told him the time or place, but he also knew it was already known to him. He would be in the ceremonial room of the monastery, a place no one was allowed to enter without the Lama's special invitation. He knew he would be there at 6 p.m., just before sunset. He also knew it would be the most important moment of his life. He couldn't explain it, but he had an indescribable feeling, one that could never be repeated, a feeling that something major was about to begin, something that might happen only once, no matter how many lives one was destined to live. It was like the feeling of standing before the abyss when you first face the physical spin of time. Yes, the first time is the most exhilarating, breathtaking moment, one that lives in your memory for eternity. Literally. Mohan shook his head. Eternity turned out to be a torment. Eternity was seduction. Eternity was a lonely journey, yet there was something so addictive about it that he couldn't resist possessing it. He wanted more than eternity. Now he knew that. But back then, When he was anticipating his initiation with Lama Sonam, he didn't know any of this. Lama Sonam was waiting for him in the middle of the ceremonial room. The room was empty, just a simple stone cave, nothing more. Mohan was surprised to see it so bare, so unprepared for any kind of ceremony. He was used to seeing religious symbols and sacred objects at important rituals. He had expected even more here, but there was nothing, just naked stone walls and Sonam Lama sitting in a relaxed meditation posture, not on the floor, but slowly levitating in the thin air. Mohan had never seen anything like that before. He knew the art of levitation existed, but he didn't truly believe in it. "Come here," Lama said. Again his lips didn't move, his voice simply appeared in Mohan's head. Mohan obeyed. Suddenly he felt the stone room disappearing, the walls moving away, the floor sinking into a dark, endless abyss. Strangely, he wasn't afraid, even though he was now also levitating beside Sonam Lama. "What is this?" he asked, looking down at the deep, dark spin that was swirling with incredible intensity of an unknown nature. "This is the time of our universe," Lama responded. "This is the spin of time. Can you really see it?" Mohan was stunned. "Yes, actually you can, but only once. Why?" "There are limits for you and me. There are boundaries. You should never ask why. You should simply know. Every Lama is allowed 45 lifetimes. This is our time span. Every time we approach the end of our lifespan, we must set the marks for our next appearance." "I don't understand." "Of course you don't. But you will. Look at me. I am the Bonpo Lama, and this is my last lifetime. I was allowed 45 lives, and I've exhausted them. It's as simple as that. I understand that." Mohan nodded. He knew that every time an old Lama died, the entire monastery traveled across their little nation to find a boy who would be the new reincarnation of the old Lama. But he didn't know that each Lama could only be reincarnated 45 times. He repeated the thought, trying to grasp its meaning. How long is 45 lifetimes? "Very long," Sonam responded. Mohan reminded himself once more that Sonam was reading his mind. Then he took a deep breath and asked the question he had kept in the deepest corner of his mind since the very first moment he entered the monastery. "You are the new Lama," Sonam said in a very simple manner. But Mohan stopped breathing when he heard this. Deep inside he already knew it, even before it was spoken. But he couldn't believe it until now. He couldn't believe it was happening to him. Suddenly he knew everything. He knew that Sonam Lama was living his 45th and final life, that he had chosen him long ago, that he had been watching and studying him for a while. "Yes, I did," Sonam confirmed. "But why me?" Mohan couldn't stop himself from asking. "You have the grit," Sonam smiled, "the strength, but it's hard to say what you must achieve as the new Lama, but why?" Mohan was no longer concentrating on the concept. He was watching the time abyss before his eyes, trying to understand what he was seeing. "Don't." "What?" Mohan was surprised. "Don't what?" "Don't try to read it. This is another limitation we have. We can see it only once when we transfer the power to the new Lama, like I am doing with you now. But we cannot read it. Why? It's all about limitations. We can just see you," said Sonam, unable to tear his eyes off the abyss of time. And Mohan suddenly realized that the old Lama was just as captivated by the sight as he was, because he was seeing it for the first time in his 45 lives. "That's right," Sonam confirmed. "The first time you see it is when you receive the transfer of continuity. The second time is when you release it, like I'm doing now, and in all your 45 lives you never understood its meaning." "No," Sonam said. He paused, then spoke in a deep, troubled tone. "You will be the last." Mohan understood immediately. He would be the last Lama. It sounded so final, so ultimate, so hopelessly irreversible that he almost choked in despair. "Why?" "I don't know," Lama responded, sounding doomed. And then they both levitated for what felt like eternity, staring into the abyss of time that stretched endlessly above and below them. They tried to read the signs, but they couldn't. It was his initiation. Mohan inhaled deeply, still unable to resolve the tension of old grievances. Why was he not allowed to read the signs of time? He couldn't understand it. He was living his 43rd life, had learned so much, possessed so many skills, but still, he couldn't understand why he wasn't allowed to see and do all he wanted. Why was he limited? What was the purpose of it? For the past few lifetimes, he had struggled with this question and found no answer. Why the limitations? Why not ask why? The limitations were especially offensive. He was appointed to guard the caves, that was all. There were bodies in these caves, and he didn't even know who they were, why he was appointed to guard them, or how long it should continue. He had been guarding them for centuries. He had learned many different things about life, mostly the arts of meditation, levitation, shamanism, and energy healing. But he always felt he was only allowed to approach the unknown up to a certain point, the limitations. His revolt against them was growing, and finally he was completely blown away by the revelations given to some seemingly irrelevant visitors of the caves. For centuries there had been none. No visitors. He couldn't even know how vast the world beyond their mountain state was. Tibetan monks had managed their own mountain state for centuries, living in rigorous isolation from the rest of the world, without any idea of what lay beyond. And why should they wonder? They had so much here: lakes of life and death waters, divine miracles, the highest energies, tremendous obstacles, the changing of seasons, the incredible beauty of nature, the opportunity to mature food and knowledge of the stars. They had the whole world here on the mountains, and they had been perfectly happy with it. Until recently, strange people began constantly bothering them. Some started appearing, asking permission to visit their sacred caves. He was surprised. In all his centuries of safeguarding the caves, no one had ever wondered about their contents, so the whole notion of guarding the caves became outdated. The entire purpose seemed frustrated simply because no one had ever attempted to violate the sanctity of the caves. But the guarding was appointed, and he served. And finally he learned why. He who had spent almost eternity by human standards beside the motionless bodies hidden in the caves was about to learn why he was guarding them. But first he learned that there was a huge, sophisticated world out there, far below their mountains, a world that offered so much unknown pleasure. There were cities full of multicolored people creating and thinking, building entire civilizations, enriched with unknown technology, writing and reading beautiful poetry. And they considered the one who possessed the key to eternity to be merely a village barbarian, illiterate and living in the cave age, while the whole world was living in the era of the future, a future he was not allowed to read. But that wasn't the biggest shock. The real shock was that the bodies sitting motionlessly and silently in his caves for centuries began a dialogue with the newcomers. These bodies actually revealed to the visitors incredible secrets that Mohan couldn't even believe. He had been guarding these secrets for centuries without knowing what he was guarding. It was offensive. He wasn't trusted with the secrets, but the newcomers were. These pathetic outsiders revealed technological secrets, the history of the human race, the fact that there were preservations of the genetic code of the human species here, and he, the guardian, was the one who was truly in possession of these secrets, yet had no access to them. It wasn't just offensive, it was insulting. But again, he was grateful that all this happened in at least one of his lifetimes. He could have actually passed away into eternity without a clue. Yes, that was a possibility. He might have died without ever knowing what was in those stupid caves he had guarded for centuries, but God did not allow it. First, it was that ugly toad-like woman with bulging eyes. When she first came, he was amazed by her bravery. He was more entertained than suspicious. He didn't even ask her twice what she was looking for in his caves. There was a ritual he was supposed to follow. It was the rule he had to perform every time some fool attempted to approach his cave. He was supposed to go to the cave and ask permission for the guest to enter. Sonam remembers that day as if it were yesterday. The toad-eyed lady approached him in the monastery. She looked weird, but then All outsiders looked weird, but she had something else aside from her ugly clothes. There was a strange shine in her ugly eyes. She looked at him as if she knew something he didn't. It was so unusual. There was a challenge in her eyes. And Sonam, whose authority was not only unquestionable in his tribe, but could not be challenged by anyone, felt amused. This skanky ferret dared to challenge him. It was unheard of. He wanted to punish her, but in a special way. She wanted to go to the caves. Well, he could lead her, at her own risk. The ritual, however, required him to approach the bodies, the stone idols sitting in the dark, cold twilight of the caves. He was supposed to approach them and ask their permission to allow visitors into the cave. In all his long service he had done this only dozens of times, and the answer was invariably no. The stone idols did not wish to be disturbed, he believed. He could communicate with them in a strange telepathic way. They could easily scan his mind, read his thoughts all day long if they wanted to, but he could not read theirs. He could only hear what they wanted him to hear, such as their orders. Visitors are not allowed, period. This time he was confident the answer would be the same. There was no doubt in his mind, but he wanted to trick the woman. He wanted to let her approach the cave as closely as possible, so she would be punished for her audacity. No earth-born being could approach the caves without permission and proper training. If an uninvited intruder approached, they would be stopped by a strong energy wall. At first they would feel a terrible headache, strong enough to knock out a strong man. The first strike was usually enough to scare most intruders away, but if a stubborn violator persisted, they would receive a sound signal, like their heads were stuffed with low-vibrating yelps, tearing apart the tissues of the brain, piercing their entire body with countless needles, paralyzing any attempt to move, any ability to resist. Only one wish remaining: to run away from this place forever and never return. Fear would freeze their soul, and it would never fully leave them after such an experience. That's what Mohan prepared for the Toad Lady. He was ready to let her get close enough to the caves to enjoy the experience. He sweetly anticipated seeing her writhing in pain, begging, no, pleading for mercy. Perhaps then her eyes would no longer exude such a daring challenge. So absorbed in this vision, he approached the cave and prepared to enter. He had both training and permission to come, but every time he entered the gate, he experienced some kind of trouble. It was a minor discomfort, but over the centuries he had never gotten used to it. It was freshly unpleasant every single time. It was like a rapid test. Those he was guarding were examining him each time he attempted to enter. It was like a set of questions asked with predilection. New questions every time, though not truly new, always variations of the same old ones. Basically, those he guarded were repeatedly inquiring whether he was entering with good intent, whether he was hiding something in the deepest core of his mind that could cause them harm, whether he intended to impair his duty of care regarding the cave and those inside it. All the same questions asked in countless variations, so he could never have a prepared, clear answer, no matter how many times he answered them. He knew that. But he also had his own agenda. For thousands of years he had mastered the skill of hiding it from the guarded inhabitants of the caves. He knew he couldn't be too curious about who they were or what their purpose was. So he learned how to block the part of his mind where this curiosity resided, so they wouldn't suspect his real intentions. His real intention, however, was changing from life to life. He was progressing in forming a new intent. He wanted to know the secrets kept in the caves. He believed that as the one who protected these secrets, he was entitled to know their contents. Perhaps the guarded ones did not share this opinion, so he was hiding this intent, and pretty successfully, as he had not yet been denied entrance into the cave. Today, for the first time ever, Mohan had an agenda of his own. He was sure he had hidden it safely in a very remote area of his brain. He had convinced himself he didn't even remember this agenda. He pretended it had never existed in the first place. He had meditated the whole morning, trying to clean his mind, arranging every single thought in order, placing them on separate shelves in his conscious mind. But the anticipation of pleasure at witnessing the stranger's punishment, tortured by the cave's forces as an unwanted intruder, was literally itching his entire being, not only his conscious but also his subconscious mind. He knew this itch wouldn't be easy to hide, but it might be easily explained if the reason was simple replacement. Say, he was worried about the week-long rain that might cause flooding in the caves. He couldn't find a better reason to explain his unusual anxiety, so he decided that the anticipated flooding would do. Confident and almost giddy, he approached the gate to enter the cave, and suddenly was stunned by the enormous power of the strike he received. It was both painful and insulting. He couldn't believe it. He, the guardian, the one who faithfully served these freakish caves for 43 generations in a row, the one who scrupulously followed the stupid rules, never betraying the interests of the guarded, was being punished and treated like a totally ignorant, absolutely irrelevant intruder. He couldn't believe it. He writhed in excruciating pain, trying to get rid of the penetrating ringing in his ears, trying to overcome the powerful convulsions torturing his entire body. When the first attack was almost over, he could only think one short thought, that he was glad there was no witness to his humiliation, while another thought, much louder and clearer than his own, filled his entire pathetic existence. One more time you try to cheat the guarded, and the entire tribe will witness your execution. And then he got it. He suddenly realized that all his pathetic attempts to clean his mind, to hide his little pitiful agenda, to bury it in some hard-to-reach areas of his brain, had always been an open book to the guarded. He couldn't hide anything from them, not even a whisper. They simply accepted him as he was. They allowed his little tricks for whatever reason. But today, there was something he was attempting that seriously disturbed them, more than ever before in thousands of years. What? What was it? Was it that he wanted to punish that little ugly, toad-looking newcomer? He asked himself, trying to find an answer. No, that couldn't be it. The guarded could not care less about his little trick of inflicting pain or punishment on someone. He was actually addicted to this guilty pleasure derived from the suffering of others. He was a very cruel ruler. Bloody rituals with human sacrifices were an undivided part of his reign, but it had never been objected to by the guarded. They never expressed any displeasure with his sadistic additions. So, what caused their anger today? Not the fact that he was trying to push in a pathetic lady visitor. No, the answer was not that. Then what? He cried, inside his brain, feeling like blood was bathing his mind, covering his inner vision, saturated with pain and humiliation. Think again, a voice said inside his head, and then he got it. He did not want to ask permission for the lady. He had simply decided not to bother asking about her. That was it. The answer was clear, and Mohan was released from the torture. It was enormous relief. It felt like total emptiness. Every muscle of his trained, lean body was suddenly seized, then released. The pain was still there, but not the cause of it. It was unbelievable relaxation, painful but enlightening. Mohan attempted to get to his feet, but failed on the first try. He tried again. It took him half an hour to regain control of his extremities and manage the movement of his body. By that moment, he already knew what had happened. He knew he was being punished by being barred from the caves for 10 days, and he was obligated to bring that toad-like lady to the cave. He was supposed to bring her to the gate, let her in, but not enter himself. That was another insult. No one had ever been allowed to enter the caves in all his 43 lifetimes. So what was so special about this lady? Why was she chosen? Was she the chosen one in general? He was stunned, stumbling, destroyed, but there was no way for him to react, no way to express his displeasure or disagreement. The power and will of the guarded ones were so superior that he would be the bitterest fool on earth if he attempted to contradict them. So he accepted his punishment and left. He knew what he was supposed to do. He knew that from this moment on, it no longer mattered what he thought. Whether he was happy or angry with the guarded, he knew they could not care less. So there was no need anymore to hide his real intentions or perform his pathetic tricks to eliminate parts of his brain. Now he knew he had never succeeded anyway. This made his life much easier on one hand. On the other hand, he suddenly realized he had much more freedom than he thought he had, and much less at the same time. He now knew he was not restricted in any thought or deed, as long as he wasn't hiding anything from the guarded, meaning anything that might be relevant to them. The only remaining question was, what was relevant to them? How could he guess that the Toad Lady could be relevant? That was a question he could not resolve yet. So he decided to return to it later, when perhaps he would have more information to make up his mind. So the Toad Lady was conducted by him to the gate in total solitude. He tried to ensure that no one from his tribe would even guess he might allow an intruder to approach the caves. Somehow he believed it would disgrace his own authority, as so far he was the only living creature allowed near them. He knew his tribe considered this a very significant issue, if they learned that some foreign lady was given the same privilege. Well, he didn't even want to think about the consequences. He felt confused and stumbled. He was discouraged by the fact that he had only 2 lifetimes left. While he was getting close to an unknown secret, he worried he wouldn't have enough time to explore all that this secret could hold. He felt an unbelievable rush to live. He was hungry for time. He felt like a teenager, worrying whether he would have enough time before the end of his life to explore all its possibilities. He was overwhelmed by this feeling. It was far more exciting than anything he had ever experienced. More exciting even than the news from Lama Sonam that he was the chosen one and would live 45 lifetimes in a row. Even then he hadn't felt this tremendous hunger for everything that was to come, and now, finally, he was facing something incredibly exciting, and he had only 2 lives left. He was stunned. The Toad Lady was waiting for him quietly, and suddenly he understood what was in her eyes. It wasn't a challenge at all. She wasn't challenging him as none of the guarded would. She was one of the guarded. She looked at him with a demand and expectation of compliance. He suddenly lost all his anger. He felt she was superior, and he was trained to serve the superior. So his second nature, his habit to comply, immediately replaced his ambitions. He bowed deeply to her and asked her to follow him. She nodded without surprise, accepting it as easily as if she had no doubt it would be this way. Perhaps she never had any doubts. There was something in this Toad Lady, something Mohan had never seen before in any human being he had encountered in his long, long lifetimes. Was she really one of the guarded? He asked himself. And suddenly the answer came to his mind, not just a feeling, but a clear, specific voice. It was a female voice. He realized the Toad Lady was speaking to him. She was reading his mind and transmitting her thoughts to him. She said, "I am not one of the guarded, but I am the enlightener. Please lead me to the gate." He complied, suddenly realizing she had known from the beginning that he intended to subject her to torture, that he wanted to hide her arrival from the guarded ones, and that she knew of his punishment. Strangely, he felt no shame. How could he be humiliated by someone superior to him? Anything from the superior is accepted as grace. He could only be humiliated by a demonstration of weakness before his tribe in front of those subordinate to him. So there was no shame. He was the guardian performing his duty, accepting his punishments and awards with appropriate mortification. So he led her to the gate, and right there she abandoned him. She stood straight in front of the gate as if reporting her own arrival. And perhaps she was. Her eyes were fixed on something Mohan could not see. She was clearly focusing on a presence he could neither feel nor see. And that made her even more superior to Mohan. He no longer objected to her superiority. He was nonetheless full of curiosity. He didn't want to leave. He hoped he would be allowed to follow her into the cave. But suddenly he received an order coming in multiple voices. "You must remain here. You will be expecting this woman. Accompany her back to the monastery. You are responsible for her safety." "But can I?" Mohan began. The answer was quick and final. No. So he obeyed again. He accepted the waiting meditation pose, aware that it might take a long time, but he was ready. He was actually happy that he was allowed at least to stay here next to the gate. The woman proceeded into the cave, moving confidently as if she knew the way, as if she had been here before. Perhaps she had, Mohan asked himself, but this time there was no answer. So he waited for her, and it was long, very long. He didn't know how long as he induced himself into the state of nirvana, aware that when he was needed, the Toad Lady would awaken him. He was used to this nirvanic state. It was the most relaxing moment of all. His soul, liberated from his body, flew freely, exploring the universe, interpreting pieces of information he could never properly place together. He always wondered what he was seeing and hearing in the nirvanic state. The more enigmatic the experience, the more excited he was upon returning from the drowsiness. But this time everything was different. He was just entering the nirvana stage when his wandering soul was literally swept away by a stream of powerful energy. The stream was hot and vigorously enduring. He was carried to different locations, watching panoramic views of something never seen before. But now he recognized some of the signs. He had seen them just once when the abyss of time had opened to his eyes during his initiation. He couldn't imagine he would be led to the same abyss, but in a completely different way. At first he couldn't understand what was going on, but then he began receiving a powerful narrative. And then he understood. The guarded ones were revealing to the Toad Lady the entire history of the earth. They showed her vivid images of how at first the earth was created by the architect, the name they used for him. Then came a powerful blow. Mohan could see only the faintest reflection of it, but even this weak reflection was blindingly dazzling. Then there was an incredible movement of particles, dancing all over in a seemingly unruled dance, yet clearly manipulated by some incredibly complex logic. Then there was a presence. Yes, Mohan could not say it more clearly. There was a presence. And he realized he was witnessing the creation of souls. Incorporeal souls filled the world. And then they arrived at a beautiful place they began to call Earth. What was this? He asked himself. What was he witnessing? Was this the beginning of life on Earth? That's how life began, he realized, completely amazed by the images flashing before his subconscious mind. Then came the narrative again, telling him the story of human civilization on Earth. There had been several attempts. There were several civilizations. The humans looked different. They were bigger, taller, had long eyes, 3 eyes. They could communicate by transmitting their thoughts to each other. They progressed fast, creating immense cities and magic. They filled the earth and the whole universe, but they were also too cruel, too aggressive, too negative. Suddenly Mohan compared their cruelty to his own and saw that he was just a baby compared to their atrocities. He thought his bloodiest rituals were the essence of evil, but in fact they were just an innocent game compared to what these gigantic humans had done. He was horrified, an emotion he couldn't believe he would ever feel. The narrative was adamant. Humans kept destroying themselves and the planet over and over, and every time they were given a new chance, a second, third and fourth time to try. Finally the architect lost his temper. He was so disappointed in his own creation that he began to doubt himself. He asked, "What did I do so wrong? Why can't these creatures simply enjoy the prosperity given to them?" Then he realized the unacceptable speed. He had given them too much, too fast. He had spoiled them so badly that the only way was to punish them first before they received any benefits. And the architect wept. He cried like a baby day and night when his children almost destroyed the earth 23,000 years ago, when they invented enormous, outrageously huge things that exploded all over the planet, tearing it apart, causing the architect incredible pain and suffering, as if his own body were being subjected to the excruciating pain of self-destruction. That's how he felt it. Mohan watched in horror as huge silver discs spewed silver eggs all over the place, and these eggs exploded into disgusting mushrooms filled with dirty fire and smoke, saturated with the cries of all caught in the whirlpool of death. The picture was so horrible that Mohan began to cry, but his cry was nothing compared to the cry of the architect. The architect was devastated. He could not believe the consequences of his creation. The blood of his soul was spreading over the world as he cradled the tortured planet in his tender hands, wailing in pain, suffering with each and every one of his children's destruction in this barbaric, senseless dream. And as the whole earth was about to explode, destroying even the slightest hope for the future, the architect in one swift motion extended his hand over the earth and took the entire pain upon himself. He drew the whole hit into himself, suffering burns, almost suffocating in despair, but the earth was saved once again. And the tears of the architect filled every wound on the planet, trying to heal them with his love and compassion. There was just one small place still dry, and Mohan, without even looking at it, knew by heart it was his mountain, it was Tibet. And suddenly he realized what he was guarding and why. He realized who the guarded ones were. They were representatives of all the destroyed civilizations living on Earth long before the current human inhabitants arose to disrupt the flow. The cave he was guarding was, in fact, a repository of the genetic fund of the human civilization. The guarded ones were the keepers of the entire ancient wisdom collected by all previous intelligent species living on the face of the earth. And he was guarding this because it was the most important treasure of all. It was knowledge, the concept of eternity that humans could achieve and reach if they survived long enough without exterminating themselves. Mohan finally realized that all those stone idols were in fact living human beings, but their minds were in the highest state of nirvana, and now he knew why he had been practicing the art of nirvana, trying to perceive it. It was the art of preservation. And in case the earth was on the verge of extermination once again, some people, bright ones, the most advanced, the keepers of wisdom, would be able to enter this deep preservation state to save all their skills for future generations, perhaps of a more successful civilization. Mohan finally understood why the nirvanic state was actually needed. Then he saw how the tears of the architect dried away and how life on earth began all over again. Once again, and he saw that the next generation of Earth's inhabitants was much weaker, much smaller than their predecessors. They were limited in almost everything. They did not have the abilities their predecessors had. They couldn't evolve as fast. They weren't as smart. They couldn't transmit thoughts, and they were not allowed access to the universal information bank where the entire knowledge of all inventions ever made by other humans was kept. Mohan heard the narrative say, "It was done for the sake of the human civilization. It was their last chance. If they are not wise enough to survive this time, the architect will not be able to save them anymore. And then it would be the end of times." "We go," the lady said, touching his shoulder. Mohan returned from nirvana slowly, looking around as if he had never seen the place. Then he met his eyes with the toad lady's. She looked startled. She said, "I can't believe it." "Can you?" he said with effort. "I don't know." She said, "They won't believe me anyway. It does so. They're still not ready for this, and they will use it for all the wrong reasons. But I must tell them." Then she moved forward without looking at him anymore. "Who is not ready?" he yelled at her back. She stopped. "Nobody. They might never be ready. But I have to do this." She visited the caves many more times, receiving more and more revelations each time. And Mohan was always present, allowed to see everything she was allowed to see. He couldn't understand why he was being allowed this information. Perhaps it was a reward for good service. He doubted that. He knew the guarded ones could easily eliminate his mind from the stream of information given to the lady, but they didn't. And so far he knew one thing for sure. They never did anything without reason. Nothing was purposeless, so there must be a reason for letting him know more than any Lama had ever known. Why? He didn't have an answer. He kept asking the same question over and over, but no answer came. And he realized he was the one who had to find it. Perhaps the whole purpose was to make him find the answer.
End of chapter. To be continued. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved.